Hello, today I'm going to be doing the 20th century book tag. I was tagged by the lovely Sonna at Books and Quills, and if you haven't seen this tag before, basically I'm going to pick a book from my bookshelf, one from each decade of the 20th century. So the first book I have chosen was released in 1908 and it is A Room with a View by E.M. Forster. I have this wonderful Penguin Essentials cover. This book was given to me as a gift and I read it pretty quickly. I enjoyed it a lot. I feel like I read a lot of books that are sort of similar to this. Basically, it's set in Italy and England in Victorian times. It's a criticism of English society at the time, but it's also a romance, and that's probably what kept me reading to the end. Now I have a confession to make. I don't have a single book from the 1910s on that bookshelf, which is awful. I can't believe it. I looked at it for about 10 minutes and double checked, but I definitely don't. I do at my parents' house, and I have the book The Wild Swans at Coole by W.B. Yeats, which is actually a poetry anthology, but I'm going to pass this one over to you. Please recommend me a book that was released sometime between the start of 1910 and the end of 1919, and I'd like to add it to my bookshelf because I'm quite embarrassed. Okay, moving on to the 1920s. This is To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. I have just started reading this. I am about 17 pages in, I think, and I don't quite know what's going on yet. It's very ambiguous. The characters are interesting, but they haven't really given much away yet, but I'm looking forward to finishing this, and I also just found out that I have to read this next semester for university, so it'll be nice to get a head start. And again, I really like this cover. I feel like I have a theme of books about woman in society going on here. But anyway, this is Good Morning Midnight by Rhys. I had to read this for university, but I just really enjoyed the story. It's something that I would read anyway. This is a book about a woman named Sophia, or Sasha, she goes by both. She's English, but she's living in Paris. She is drinking a lot of alcohol. She's meeting a lot of strange men that she doesn't trust. This is a modernist novel, and there's a great influence of art and of the city and her surroundings, and it's quite a sad book. It's about Sasha's sort of depression and how vulnerable she is in this big city where she just wants to be a stranger. I definitely recommend this. Moving on to the 1940s, 1947 to be precise, this is A Streetcar Named Desire by Tennessee Williams. I know you probably were forced to read this in school. I was as well. This is a play, and I don't talk about drama all that much when I talk about books on this channel, but this is definitely one of my favourites, and if you don't read a lot of drama, Tennessee Williams can be a good place to start because he's really descriptive in terms of colours and sounds in his stage direction, so it's easy to build a mental picture, and his characters are just really strong and really wonderful. And if you read this, then you'll be able to understand the episode of The Simpsons where Marge stars as Stella alongside Ned Flanders' Stanley. You'll understand it, and you'll find it even funnier than you did before. So A Streetcar is a classic and I love it very much. My next book is On the Road by Jack Kerouac. This was published in 1957. I think it's an American classic. I absolutely adored this book. It took me a really long time to read it because there's just so many words, even when not that much is happening. It's poetry in places. It's wonderful. The American Dream, freedom, Beat Generation, all in here and all very wonderful. I'm going to copy Sonna for my next one. My 1960s pick is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. You all know how much I love this book, but I hate it for making me so utterly miserable. It's partly biographical if you're interested in Sylvia Plath's life, but it's also just a beautifully written story set in New York. And if you're studying Sylvia Plath's poems, this novel can be a good sort of study guide because it further explains some of the themes and meanings in some of her poems. So I love this book very much. 1970s, and it's so strange to me that this came out in the 1970s, bearing in mind I read it as a child growing up in the 90s. This is Fantastic Mr. Fox by Roald Dahl. I absolutely adore Roald Dahl. He's one of my favourite authors, and I think this story is often overlooked. It is one of his shortest books, from memory anyway. And there's of course the Wes Anderson movie, which I'm also very fond of. It's just a charming, lovely story with wonderful Quentin Blake illustrations, and you should just revisit your childhood and reread some of these books sometime. 1980s, I have picked The Colour Purple by Alice Walker. I had to study this book when I was doing my A-levels. It is not for the light-hearted. It's full of violence, strong language, abuse, racism. There are so many important things happening in this book to the main character Celie, who just has a really difficult childhood, and then she's forced into this deeply unhappy marriage, but she meets a wonderful woman, a celebrity of sorts called Shug Avery, and Shug sort of teaches her about being a woman and being a human and being a Christian even. It is ultimately uplifting, and I'm probably going to reread this soon. And finally, the 1990s. If you didn't see this coming, then shame on you. 1999, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. This is the first Harry Potter book that I read. It was given to my brother as a gift, and I just fell in all kinds of love with it, and it still remains my favourite book. It's just really nostalgic for me to have this in my hands, knowing that it's the thing that started this wonderful relationship with such a wonderful series of movies and a way of life, really. So there you go, I've taken you through the 20th century with some of the books that I own and some that I've never mentioned in videos, so it was really nice to have to think about them. I am going to tag my friend Barry at Baz Pierce, and I'm going to tag Lauren of Ren Kelly M. I don't think either of them have done this tag, and I would love to hear what they have to say. Thank you to Sana for tagging me. I am off to America next week, but there should be another video on this channel before I go, so this is not goodbye.